Adderley Brothers Blindfold Test, record number 1.
How about that?
Clock Terror. That's it.
That's right, Clock Terror is happening.
Best thing on the record. Clock Terror.
I like the arrangement. Thought it was
Yeah.
pretty hip. I don't know what they intend though, you know, when I listen to that kind of thing. I don't know whether they intend to, when I say they, I mean, I don't know whether this is an arranger's record or whether it's a band. I know it's not a band because Clock Terror is in the studios in New York, so it's, you know, some kind of a writer's kind of record or something of that nature. And I don't know whether they are trying to reach a jazz market or pop market or what they're trying to do, because it's got enough elements of all of that to be any kind of thing, you know.
Yeah.
Nothing artistically shattering, but I thought it was very well done and very well played.
Flash of alto there?
Yeah.
No.
Well, I didn't have any idea who that was. I thought for a minute it might have been Quill, but I don't know who it was.
I didn't dig that alto too much. It was nice to hear the alto player playing with feeling. And in these days and times, most of the alto players, most of the jazz musicians play with a little more feeling than, say, a few years ago.
Yeah.
The alto wasn't startling. Clock Terror was very good. The arrangement got to be kind of monotonous as it wore on and on and on with this thing, to me. But I think all in all that it was a good record.
Mm-hmm.
If you're gonna rate it on a basis,
Well, you know, 2 is fair, 3 is good, 4 is very good, and 5 is tops.
3.5.
Okay.
3, you agree with that?
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you have this one.
Yeah. Well,
Most of it. Except I want to make my statement about the rhythm section.
well, I tell you, I know, of course, who most of the cats are. The only cat that I don't think I can identify by now is the drummer.
Yeah.
And it's probably just as well, because it sounds like Benny Carter with the Giants. Funny thing about this, you know, I've always said that a truly great player sort of hardly confines himself to a school. You know, I can hear Dizzy Gillespie playing with, I heard him record with Duke. I can hear a Dizzy Gillespie playing with a bassy or with a small group or with a swing group or anything. I think that Dizzy could have fit right in this just as well.
Yeah.
And I sort of feel the same thing. I don't mean that everybody spans everything, but there's a definite overlapping of influences in this kind of personnel, because like Andre Previn could be a swing player or a modern player, and Leroy Vinegar, being the type bass player he is, he can fit with the most hip modern jazz group, or in this case a group that feels largely like a swing group.
Yeah.
And Frank Rossellino plays well in this group. He sounds very well. So does Ben. In fact, Nat identified Ben in the ensemble, which was beautiful to me, you know.
That's wonderful.
Very interesting, though. I think that when you listen to this kind of thing, the hippies probably won't agree with me. When I say hippies, I don't mean that derogatory. It's a feeling, a school of feeling. I mean, the hippies will probably say, well, hey, you know, the cat said, what is that, you know? But I think that one should listen to everything in its own context, according to itself. And I think this is a good record, especially for these cats, you know, because for them to get together with all these different ideas and get a unity of feeling, with the possible exception of the rhythm section. I don't know, in the section itself, it got a little funny.
That's right.
But the general overall feeling was great to me. And I love Benny.
I think the rhythm section sounds like well, you know, Andre is great and Leroy is great, and I don't know who the drummer is, but he's in that company. He's probably great too. And I think that without the three of them playing together, maybe it would have a better feel. You know, everybody doesn't always play well together. You can take the three greatest cats in the world, and they may not necessarily fit with each other. And I
Don't
think
forget
that's
though,
what
it's four of them. Bonnie Kessel is there too.
Excuse me.
That's right, yeah.
Pardon me. Yeah, well, what I mean is that I think that the rhythm section was a little stiff at times.
Yeah.
But for each cat's statement in the context of that tune, the
Yeah.
traditional changes and so forth, I thought it was a good 4-star effort.
I'm still disagreeing with you about that guitar player. Now you still Bonnie, but I believe it was Harry Bellis.
Who do you think it was?
I thought it was Harry Bellis.
Well, I
Maybe
think
it's
it's
because I
Bonnie.
haven't heard that much of Bonnie.
Actually, they got the Texas sound anyhow. I guess it could be any of those cats, but I thought
Yeah.
the sound itself sounded a little more like Bonnie to me.
Okay.
Yeah. What would you rate it, Nat?
Huh? 4.5.
4.5. And you give it 4?
Yeah.
All right.
Welcome, traveler.
Well,
You going first or me?
No, you start this time, Nat.
I'm scared of that one.
You can start the last one.
I'm really scared of it.
Well,
You know, if you
can
listen,
go
if you listen to this kind of thing, and you just listen to one track like this, I can get a. First of all, the trumpet player is very good. It sounds like a good trumpet player.
Yeah.
Like, being unrestricted the way that this type thing is, I don't know exactly what they meant to do, but whatever they meant to do, I think it was well done from what I can understand about it. I don't understand everything about this type thing. They all sound like good musicians. I'm afraid to say who it is because it can be any number of at least 3 different groups that I can think of. Being the kind of tune it is, a slow tune like this, if it had been a faster tune, I probably could make a more accurate guess as to who it
Well, I heard you mention
really
one
is.
name while it was on.
I mentioned Don Ellis while it was going on because this confused me from the beginning as much as I didn't want to make a guess, in as much as I haven't heard Don Ellis, and so I don't know
you
how
just-
he sounds.
You know, you mean you just heard what kind of things he does?
I just read about what kind of things he does, and I don't know whether that was Don Ellis or not, but if it is Don Ellis, then he's a good trumpet player. And the best that I can say about it is that under the circumstances, I would rate it highly. However, I think that if I had to listen to the full album, I would probably rate it lower because I think that it would wear over a period of time. I don't know about playing without chords, this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But these particular people sound to me that if they were playing with people who played with chords, then they would probably sound good.
Yeah.
So the vibes player sounded like a good vibes player. The piano player, I didn't get what he was doing, but then that's another thing altogether. And I don't think he intended for me to get what he was doing because he didn't play any chords. So that is. I'd rate it highly. I'll give it 3.5.
Do you think it constitutes playing without chords, Junior?
I don't know what it meant, really. I don't know what the composer intended, because I have no point of reference. I guess,
But playing without tonality is not the same thing as playing without chords. Is it?
yeah, you're right, but I don't know what he intended. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
According to the widespread current thinking in jazz, it doesn't you don't have to know what it means.
Yeah.
You know, you just either listen to it and enjoy it or not. So I'll just put it frankly. You know, once I read a review of one of our records by a guy named Leroy Jones or something like that, who said that that to him, listening to that particular record he was reviewing, the whole thing was a bore. He
Yeah.
thought that there was not enough new being said, you know. And Nat sort of felt a draft when he read the thing. He says, like, what does he mean? Not enough new being said. he felt that it was too much like the same routine, you know, like Bobby Timmons was nothing, and we were nothing, and the whole thing was really just a bunch of nothing, and that it would, if he heard one tune, he heard enough of the Adderleys for the evening. And I felt that he was entitled to say that if that's the way he felt, you see. And by the same token, I'll say this, that all I have to hear of this kind of music is a little bit. And then because I have no point of reference and I'm not interested in the same kind of thing myself, that it wouldn't interest me very long. Yeah. In fact, while listening to this, I was wondering when it was going to end, more or less. Not because it was bad, but good, because I don't know whether it was good or bad. I feel that all the guys are obviously decent musicians, you know. The bass player sounds good, the drummer was doing all sorts of things, but I don't know what it meant. And unfortunately, I'm one of those old-timers who feel that I have to get an understanding of what it means in order to really thoroughly enjoy a thing. And I don't think that I'm ready to rate this because for that same reason. Yeah, live it up. Bye-bye.
So yeah, we got them, Leonard.
Yeah, we got them with no trouble.
Get it all figured out.
Yeah. Not everybody, you know, of course. I don't know all those names. But I know for sure that it's certainly Clifford Brown and Art Farmer. And for the time, I'm figuring chronologically, let me see. Now, it had to be 1953.
53, 54.
Well, 54, you were over there with Lionel.
Yeah, but they had been there the first of the year, so it could have been.
They had?
They had been over there, you know, like the last.
Oh, yeah. Well, no later than 54, first of 54. And for the time, especially, I thought that Brownie and Farmer sounded very well. I always liked Benk Hallberg's lyricism. I thought that it was fair, Lars Galeen. I didn't like the alto player because he reminds me of. I didn't like him simply because he didn't swing enough. You know what he sounded like to me? He sounded like Paul Desmond without Paul Desmond's pretty sound. Yeah. You know, and the rhythm section just never really got off the ground to me. But it was very interesting to hear how those cats sounded then, because Browning is startling with his same facility, I guess, that he's had for years. He's beautiful, and Farmer still has that strong, warm. He had that warm feeling then that he has today, which was beautiful.
You know, on that record, to me, it sounded like, you know, the old records of Basie with Prez. You know how Prez sounds like a breath of fresh air when he comes in. Yeah. You know, it said he sounds so much in front of the rest of what's going on right at the time. You know, and this is the way it sounds to me with Brownie and Art playing. And Benk Hallberg plays well. I can't stand that left hand way of playing. I hate that, really. That's one of my pet hates, to piano players that play with the left hand like that, strict kind of way like that. Yeah. But what he was doing with his right hand was very pretty. The rest of them, I didn't dig them. Period. And for the time.
That alto player must have been Arne Domnerus or something.
Well, then he still got a lot better later on, because I heard something else by him when I was over there last year. It was good. But I sit and rate them, you know. So I rate them on the basis of what I think is good and what I think is bad, and I think that the good is as good as the bad, and I don't know what to say about that. I'll give it about 3.5 stars for Brownie and Art and the time that it was made. Yeah. And for what Benk Hallberg played in the right hand. And I'd give it an awful lot of stars if it wasn't for the rest of that thing going on all the time. That funny rhythm section and them cats playing that funny stuff and other people. Yeah. At least, like Cannon said on the previous record, with this record, you've got a point of reference. With the other record, with Don Ellis, you don't have a point of reference. You don't really know how to rate it because you don't have anything to base it on. But I got something to base this on, and it ain't that good. It's just a Brownie and Art and.
Well, I'll in that case, I'll have to disagree with you even more, because if it was 1953 or early 54, it was during the height of the West Coast jazz thing, when everything that was important in jazz, and thinking about foreign cats and all like that. Their only point of reference was American records and American musicians, and the big stars were the cats out here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so if those cats were influenced by Jerry Mulligan and by Paul Desmond, so I can understand more, and I even sympathize with them more, and would give them 4 stars.
Okay, you give them 4 stars, but I ain't gonna give them no more stars than that, 'cause that ain't even good West Coast.
But you don't think it's good Europe?
That's a good
Listen,
point.
that ain't even good Alabama, that's Western Europe.
Excuse me. Well, I liked everything but the rubato parts. I didn't like the rubato parts too much, you know. But it's worth wading through all that just to get to the few bars
You know what?
of Ray Nance and
Johnny
Johnny
Hodges.
Hodges. Plus Duke's comp is always interesting. Oh, what was that in there? It sounded like a baritone horn.
It sure did, man, but it must have been a valve trombone, 'cause he ain't got no baritone.
Well, didn't the timbre, the sound wasn't like a
No, it
valve
wasn't
trombone.
like a
It
valve
sounded an
trombone.
awful lot like a baritone horn to me. I don't know what it could have been, but well, that just goes to show you that Duke has a way of taking something simple and very simple and making something out of it, you know.
Get that a whole lot of stuff.
How
I mean, I think it would be unfair to give it 2 minute stars after you wouldn't have any point of reference for Duke, because
Yeah,
he's
well-
certainly done a lot of better things than that, you know.
Well, yeah.
But
Well, he's still good.
for
Yeah,
Ray
I'm
Nance
thinking
and
about
Johnny
what was
Hodges, give
happening.
him 4 stars.
I'm going back to 4.5.
All right, you can have different ratings.
I likes it.
Well, you were.
Jackie McLean.
Oh, yeah, it probably is. I
Oh,
guess.
that's Jackson.
Yeah.
You know, them cats like Arnett and them
Should
get
listen.
them to listen,
That's what they
listen to
should
what
do.
Jackie McLean
Should
have been
listen.
talking about for years.
That's
Them
right.
boys-
That's what they should do.
The
They
boys
should
been out
listen.
front.
for a
In
long
fact,
time.
it ain't Arnett that needs to listen to him. I take that back. It ain't
No,
Arnett.
Lewis
It's
not
them
do
people that's fostering that thing. It's the Nat Hentoff and them should listen to
Martin
Jackie
Williams.
McLean and the cats more, and they'll find out that what Arnett's talking about is not really that. It ain't out there. You understand?
Yeah.
It's just being something that makes it more ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because Jackie McLean been way ahead of the game, long time.
Yeah, that's true.
For example, and now what kind of you know that line is mean, and that other
That's
one
right.
little melon there that he wrote long time
That's
ago.
right.
Listen, they ain't done nothing no hipper than that. They can't do anything hipper than that.
I'll say this. I don't know whether you had the machine on or not. My first impression was that it was Max, because the last part of that writing sounded like Booker Little's
Yeah.
style of writing to me. Plus, Donald's vibrato is similar to Booker's. But Booker's was probably the most fluent of all the trumpet players I ever heard.
Buck a little?
Yeah. Of all the modern jazz trumpet players, I mean, there've always been guys around like Joe Wilder, who were really improbable technicians, and before him there was Charlie Shavers and those guys, who have always been fine musicians. But I thought that Booker was the fastest and smoothest trumpet player I have ever heard in my life.
Well, he really got
Yeah, he
Booker
really
had the
had to
technique.
get-
He had the trumpet playing under control. He really had that
Well,
down.
but I could tell it Donald, because
He had a
though
whole
Donald
wall.
has a lot of facilities, he has a lot of chop trouble.
Uh-huh.
And it comes through in his playing sometimes, distinguishes him. But I enjoyed it. It was probably Jackie's writing, I guess, because it was
Probably was Jackie's turn. Because
Jackie's
Jackie
been out front with things for a long time. So, for
Rated?
Joe solo and everything, I call it 5.
That's good.
4.5.
All right.
You know what I mean?
You
You
dig?
know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't mess with that.
Oh, no.
No. Brother Kirby.
You talk about putting things in their own context, listening to them the way they're supposed to be.
Man, that's 5.
I don't know when this might have been recorded, but whenever it would have been recorded, it would be, the performance was superb. And they swung. This group was just too much.
Bring us to
Say
Charlie
what you said
Shaver.
about it before while the record was on.
Oh, I said this was the first small band during the big band era, I say, that made me sit up and take notice and say, wow. Because the musicianship was superb, the ideas were superb, they swung, and O'Neill Spencer was a fantastic drummer. Charlie Shavers, once again, was a crazy trumpet
Still
player.
is.
And Buster Bailey was a great, everybody was great. Who came first, Procope or Benny Carter?
Yeah, I think they came up in the same era.
Hey, listen, this has got nothing to do with that record, but chronologically speaking, you heard them before you heard the Savoy Sultan?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't really remember who did I hear first.
But you remember
I
having-
heard them first.
You
I
both
heard-
remember having heard this band, though.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
Kirby, John?
Listen.
Yeah.
It's a funny story. They made some transcriptions years ago when transcriptions were the thing, and we had one radio station in our hometown of Tallahassee, and they had a great transcription by the John Kirby group.
Oh,
And I heard this group when the station first came on the air. One of the first transcriptions they used to play, they played things like Matty Malnick or somebody, and follow it with a John Kirby transcription, and we just glued to the radio, you know.
5 times.
5 times.
Nat.
You listen, he plays so many funny instruments, man. I don't know whether that second one, I know it wasn't, at first I thought it was an alto, and it wasn't the alto, so it must have been the manzella or the stritch or whatever them other ones are. But he sounded better on the second solo. I like what he played better on the second solo than on the tenor solo that he played.
I think it was a soprano, and
Could've
it
been
sounded
soprano.
good.
Yeah.
I have long been a Roland Kirk supporter for more reasons than one. First of all, it amazes me that he can play all them all at one time, you know. And second is I think he's genuinely talented. I would shudder to think of what he would sound like if he was anybody's ordinary saxophone player who played every day playing with the cats and just swinging along and so forth, you know, because I think he's really got a lot of talent. The organ player must have been a piano player because I noticed he let his figure that he'd been playing throughout go when he started playing his own solo. I know he's got 2 keyboards and he had a bass player, so, you know, it seems to me that he could have kept it going, you know. In fact, I thought that was the weakest part of the record,
The organ solo.
you know. Not that his solo was bad, because it was interesting, but not really, you know, nothing exceptional. And all in all, it was a pretty good record. And because of its uniqueness, I think it's even more,
Yeah, he kept playing all them horns.
yeah, you know. 'Cause the only way I could tell it was Roland Kirk was he blew his siren.
Yeah. Is that how you know it now?
Mhm.
Well, yeah, I didn't get it until he played the siren because I told Cannon while the record was going I didn't recognize the tenor player, but I didn't say anything else about it. And then the second solo that I thought was an alto at first and then began to sound, it did sound like a soprano. And then I thought that this solo was much better, and it was killing me because I couldn't think of a minute who plays soprano saxophone. It definitely wasn't trained, and it certainly wasn't Steve Lacy,
And it certainly wasn't Pony Poindexter.
you know. And I didn't know who it was for a minute because the soprano solo to me was very good. So, that is, I don't know who them other cats were. It doesn't really matter. They played what they were supposed to play all right.
For Roland Kirk and so forth, 4 stars.
I agree.
That was a Manzello.
You know, I've listened to Roland a lot, and I've heard him play these instruments a lot. And sometimes, because it's difficult playing 2 and 3 instruments like that, he gets out of tune on one or the other.
Yeah.
I was particularly, now that I think about it, I'm particularly knocked out with this particular record because he managed to stay in tune.
Yeah.
He managed to keep both of them in tune very well, all the way through.
Should have seen us all sitting around here counting 5 beats to the bar.
Nobody was dancing.
Who thought this up, Dick? Who was it?
Leonard Feather wrote that.
Leonard Feather? The guy that did the encyclopedia?
Right.
He is a cook, ain't he, huh? What's this we're going to get? I'm going down to New Orleans to hear. Did you hear about it, 12-part jazz?
I don't know much about that.
I'm going down there to hear it on the way out to the coast next week. You have no idea how it sounds, huh?
No.
Neither have I. What the world can it mean, 12-part jazz? I'll tell you what we've got. We don't have any 5 beats to the bar, Dick, but we got some 5 voices to the bar here that we can do with a very touching thing. Are you folks ready with your handkerchiefs? Because this is a very touching thing for Father's Day. I'd like to have the proper respect during the rendition of the number. Father, no one seems to realize that.
Different way, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear you play. You could probably play in a strictly modern context if you felt like it.
Maybe I could, Leonard. I don't know. I think the main thing with that is the feel and the facility, which I think legitimate training gives you. I know. I don't know Miles Davis. I never met him, and I had never met Clifford Brown before he died. I admired him a great deal, and Dizzy.
Yeah.
But I know that these men had to be well schooled on the instruments to be able to get around them. You know, it's one thing to be able to think of an idea, and it's another thing to be able to perform the idea.
That's right.
So when you get these great jazz thoughts in your mind, it's necessary to have the facility to play the ideas you think of.
But did you actually become aware of the modern jazz things pretty soon after they started? Like
Oh yes,
bop
I
and
did.
so forth?
Very much so. Yes.
You were in the service
I dug
probably
it.
at that
Yes,
time.
I did. I dug it all along. Dizzy always knocked me out.
That's interesting.
Clifford Brown and Miles Davis. These guys are great players. And I like the way they present it.
I don't suppose you'll. Maybe I'm assuming this wrongly, but I don't think you're going to be heard in the present context continuously for a long time, because it seems to me that the kind of band you have now, although it's wonderful for Dixieland, does limit you to a certain extent.
Yes, it does, Leonard. I'd like to do other things. I want to broaden out and be able to do it all. If I can, I'd like to try, you know.
Well, you have the personal ability, I'm sure. It's just a matter of if you can take a larger or more versatile group on the road with you.
Yeah, maybe we can get to that somehow. I hope so.
Oh, I see.
It's quite
Well,
difficult
although
to.
these guys are very good for what you're doing.
Yes, they're good players. And
How did the showmanship develop? Is that sort of a spontaneous thing, or did you become?
yeah,
aware
it
that
was a sort of a spontaneous
commercially
thing,
desirable?
and it seemed to me like people, you know, dug it a lot more when we seemed like we were enjoying what we're doing, which we do enjoy it. I
Sure.
mean, and I feel like that if that can establish a rapport between the audience and the players, and I feel like it's a good thing, because then when you get the audience with you and on your side, then you can experiment, so to speak, and throw some different things at them that they may be more receptive to than they would if you just did it cold, you know.
Yeah, well, it's not synthetic. I mean, it looks so it's really.
Yeah, we
authentic
feel
that
it.
you're
We
enjoying yourselves. Which
enjoy
is
it.
fine. Well,
I think you can get a happy swinging feel with playing down home stuff and modern stuff and the whole deal, as long as it can keep swinging.
Sure. Well, let's see if there are any other vital facts that I need. How tall are you actually?
I'm 6'2".
6'2". I've seen so many varied things on that.
Some vital statistics, I weigh 300 pounds.
You really do exactly?
Yeah.
Just about exactly.
Just a little under it, but I say it makes a more round figure, you know. Really round.
Next, I should get you chest, waist, and hip measurements.
Those I'm afraid to take.
Are your family all big?
No, they're not. No, my wife is little, and a couple of my kids are big. But
Oh, I forgot to ask you about when were you married? What year?
I was married in 42.
Uh-huh.
19 years.
Is your wife
Soloist.
interested in music?
No, she's a listener, you know,
Uh-huh.
but she has no ear or anything. But she likes to listen.
Yeah.
And
You have
so
eight-
far, none of my kids have shown any.
How many boys do you have?
2 boys,
2 boys and 6
Yeah.
girls?
yes.
Oh. And none of them show any particular interest in music?
Well, they have good time, you know. Like I have a daughter, 14-year-old. She's a dancer. She has great time, but her ear is not there.
Yeah.
And now my son, 5, Steve, he wants to play
Oh,
trumpet, and maybe he's going to make it. Now, I tried to start him off just a couple of months ago, but he's just a little too young to hold the instrument up, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give him another year.
Uh-huh.
I think it's
That's pretty young.
important to start at that age. I mean,
Uh-huh.
great if I can get in
Yeah.
some good basic fundamentals on him. I think he could be a good player.
How many years of study do you actually have?
Oh God, I studied for many years. Let's see, I'm playing for 31 years now, and I started at age 6 and studied with every good teacher I could find until I was 21.
Yeah. Oh, you really
Yeah.
But you came up at a time when there was no teaching of jazz the way there is
No,
now.
there was no
It was
teaching
all-
of jazz.
all
That's
legit.
right, all legit.
That's really changed a hell of a lot in the last couple
It
of
certainly
years.
has. It's changed a great deal. I think it's all for the better too.
Yeah. Well, people weren't aware that it was a form of music that could be taught or that could be even taken seriously, I guess.
Right, as long as it's done in the right order, Leonard, you know. Let's get the fundamentals and down first. Then
Yeah.
we go into the jazz playing.
Yeah, that's right.
And I find that in a lot of cases this order is reversed, which is impossible.
Yeah.
Now you have
that's
Miles
true.
Davis and Dizzy, and then you have the guys who try to imitate these players without the facility to imitate them. It just doesn't
Yeah.
come off.
Yeah, that's true. I think I'll just turn off the tape recorder, write down the names of the guys because they're all right. Period. So I decided to sit down and put on paper what I heard about blues. Period. In Texas, I made my mind up I would really be a blues singer. Unquote. Paragraph. Big had been south for the first time in 1941. When he went to the bayous, talked to people 80, 90, and 100 years old, and, quote, got to the roots. Period. They seemed to know more about things than young people know. Period. For a year or two I did this, dash, Mississippi, Georgia, and later I was in Florida in the Army. Period. I went down to all the little towns around Florida and listened to these guys sit in bars, drinking beer and playing guitar. Period. And I'd always visit the Holiness Church in any town I went to. Unquote. Paragraph. On his new investigation of the blues, Big got a bunch of records by Walter Brown and Joe Turner, listened, studied, toured Texas and the South again on his own, and as he says, quote, had to slum in order to learn some of the things I learned. Period. I stayed raggedy so I could make it into places where you couldn't hardly go, comma, way back in the bayous where they wouldn't accept you any other way. Period. I met people who had been slaves, comma, and they told me stories about slavery and the meaning of a lot of things I didn't know. Period. And copy on page 7 from I caught a freight train, halfway down the page that is, all the way down to the bottom of page 7, where it says, stayed there 14 weeks. And then I used to open the show, comma, with plenty of spirit, comma, dancing and singing. Period. Willie Bryant was in town doing a disc jockey show, and he told me a lot of things about New York, comma, so next thing I know I'm on the plane. Period. That was in 57, and soon I found myself stranded in New York, comma, because none of those things he talked about ever happened. Then copy from So I Got Me a Job on page 8. All the way down to the top of page 9 where it says they took the record off the market. Paragraph. For a while, quote, for a while I was staying with Ben Webster on Long Island, comma, and one night he was late for a TV show with Art Ford, so I drove him there. Period. We all told Art Ford to have me sing, dash, a spur-of-the-moment thing, dash. And before I knew it, I was on television. Period. I did his show several times, and this led to other things, comma, like the Great South Bay Festival, comma, which gave me my first real opening in New York. Paragraph, quote, living in Jamaica, Long Island, I wound up singing and putting on the show and being maitre d' at the Copa City in Jamaica. Period. Then came my first LP, comma, for United Artists, comma, singing a set of blues by Langston Hughes, comma, and from there I went with Nat Pierce's band into Birdland. Paragraph, quote, one night John Hendricks came into Birdland. Period. He and I were talking about the tambourine. Period. I played it that night at Birdland, and everyone was surprised to see it because nobody ever heard of it in a jazz club. John and I talked about blues history, comma, and how his father and my father were preachers. Period. Next thing I know, I got the message to come to Monterey. Period. So my biggest break was through John Hendricks, dash, I got to Monterey. Period. And from there, and there I met Irv Townsend of Columbia Records, and he brought me to Los Angeles. And I started working Shelley Mann's club and doing concerts with Shelley. Period. I made an album for Columbia, and it's due out about now, comma, so I hope I'm on my way, unquote. Paragraph, Big's style is unique among blues singers. Period. Among other attributes, he has the amazing ability to shift unpredictably from an earthy folk blues style to a sudden fusillade of notes straight out of bop. Period. His explanation of his musical philosophy is enlightening. Colon, quote, I knew Bird pretty well. Period. I couldn't get too close to him because I wasn't his type of fella, comma, so I had to steer around this, comma, but I still admired what he was doing. Period. And at one time, I used to play fast trombone and try to play like J.J. Paragraph. Quote, Brunzi and singers like that were a little bit too country for my taste. Period. I think that the South tends to slow life down by being so warm. Comma. Perhaps it means singers do the same thing. Dash, slow themselves down to a crawl, like the people there, period. But in Kansas City, comma, Pete Johnson and those fellows, comma, they always moved things along at a pretty pace. Period. So in my blues, I try to make a happy medium. Semicolon, have things with a little bounce, and so you always have something going for you. Period. Sometimes it's pretty rough to capture this, comma, because some musicians started in the middle of the game and they don't know the rudiments. Period. You try to explain it to them, but it's like Greek. Period. This can be pretty rough on singers. Period. I appreciate those who can play right for me, comma, and those who can't, comma, well, comma, I just adjust myself to them, and I can do this very easily. Paragraph. Big Miller's